It's Thursday night. Welcome to the Audible Live. Sigmund Bloom here with Matt Waldman, Jeff Bell. And we got a game. We got an interesting game, like Al Michaels was saying. You might look at the score and think it's another boring Thursday night game. Anything but boring, Jeff. As we go to halftime, give us a game update.
Game update right now. Tennessee is leading 14-6. We've seen, and it really is looking like a premier AFC team against a struggling Green Bay team that's hanging into there. Green Bay hasn't given up on their season yet, but we know how their season has gone so far. And Tennessee would have stretched this a little bit, but they had a goal line stand that Green Bay stood up and stopped them within the red zone. They left with no points. But you're seeing the passing game in Tennessee start to click up a little bit, and that's something that had been lacking. Obviously, when they had Malik Willis in the last couple of weeks, going into that Chiefs game, they might have been able to win that game had they had any semblance of a passing game at all. But with the return of Ryan Tannehill and really with the return of Treylon Burks and the emergence of Treylon Burks, and that's probably the biggest storyline right now for fantasy, that and then the rookie on the other side, Christian Watson, continuing from last week where he had 3 touchdowns, scoring a touchdown in this one, getting that production there and seeing that he's not a flash in the pan. So that's what's going on so far in that game. And we did get the Derrick Henry touchdown, so you're feeling good about him.
Yeah, Henry, he threw a pass for a yard. You're right, though. Ryan Tannehill looking really sharp. The Titans' pass offense coming together, a complementary, balanced offense. And we got to remember this team, they're battle-tested, right? So certainly, like you said, Treylon Burks coming back. This is a big deal. Robert Woods coming back from ACL, so maybe he's starting to round into form now. Nick Westbrook-Akina had that big game for them last week to help account for the win over Denver. And this team's going to be a tough out. I mean, there are teams in the AFC that have flashier passing games, that have maybe have more personality or remarkable things when you watch them. The Titans are a bit of a throwback, but they're very good at it. And Treylon Burks looks like, it's funny, Matt, I had Christian Watson as the cover boy for this episode saying, is this the receiver who could save your season? And he did have a touchdown, as Jeff pointed out. It was on a free play, Aaron Rodgers. It's the one time tonight that Aaron Rodgers kind of looked like Aaron Rodgers of old. But otherwise, the vertical, there was one pass he had to Randall Cobb, who's back. It was pretty good, where they gave him some time. But you can see that he just can't work that magic. They showed his thumb. But we're seeing it instead, Treylon Burks having the big game. Yes, Watson had the touchdown, but Burks was 6 for 60 in the first half, Matt. So did I take everyone off the trail? Should Treylon Burks maybe have been the player that we were looking at as Tennessee is showing this more balanced offense? Do you think Burks can make an impact in the second half of the season?
Burks can be helpful, but I don't think either of them are going to save your season. Nonetheless, I think that you're going to see ups and downs out of both of them. I mean, they're rookies. They play like rookies. Burks is going to give you some big plays and then a bunch of small ones because, the idea, all the fawning over him as a short area receiver and what happens in college football doesn't translate well to the NFL. Let's just put it this way. If Tony Pollard can outrun Alex Anzalone to the edge on a regular basis, then what do you think Treylon Burks is going to do against a bunch of safeties and cornerbacks? It's not going to happen as often as you saw against Alabama, even the great Alabama defenses of old. It's just a different game. But you will see enough volume from him that he can be a wide receiver 3 for you with occasionally better games. And I think with Christian Watson, what you're going to see is where he may not be as consistent as Treylon Burks, you're going to see ups and downs. He's going to be more Gabriel Davis-like in the sense that he may have, another 2 to 3 games over the rest of the year where he's massive. And then he may have a couple of games that are like this, where maybe it's like decent enough that you started him, but kind of wish there may be someone else on your roster that you wished that you started instead. And then you're going to have another, 2 or 3 games where he's just not good, where he has multiple drops. I mean, Aaron Rodgers looks at him like he's, if you remember Bull Durham, he's like Aaron Rodgers is like Crash Davis looking at Nuke LaLoosh going, you could just read his mind with what's going on. It's like he watches a couple of throws and he's like, come on now. I mean, not even high school players know better than this, and then he'll catch a touchdown and the look on his face is like, see, this is what you do in practice. This is what you just need to keep doing, like every play. Just keep doing that. You can see Aaron Rodgers definitely is a truth teller from the standpoint of bluntness. He may not always tell the truth, but his face is a truth-telling kind of personality, and you can see him just riding the ups and downs of Watson.
Yeah.
So they both have value, but I don't think we're looking at them as the saviors for seasons.
Jeff, we saw last week, it was like the last gasp, right? If Green Bay lost last week against Dallas, people were talking about, do we need to see Jordan Love? Did they take a look at what they have there for the future? Almost like it would have been the end of the Aaron Rodgers era. And instead it was a dream, but maybe a dying dream, as we're back this week. And you've been watching the first half. Is this a case of, Green Bay came back to life, got back up off the deck after going down 2 touchdowns to Dallas, but it wasn't really one that revived their season? I compared it to the defibrillator. Christian Watson was the defibrillator for that team. Is this a sign that, no, they're a mediocre team now? Or maybe is this a sign that we need to be giving the Titans more credit?
I lean towards the latter. The Titans deserving a little bit more credit, because this was the number 1 seed in the AFC last year. And then they got upset in that first playoff game, and that kind of took people off the scent a little bit there. But this is a very good football team, a very good program that Mike Vrabel has been running. And this is a short week where Green Bay is coming off that very, very emotional win, that overtime win against Dallas in that later window, whereas Tennessee's rolling in here a little bit more, I think maybe a little bit more primed, ready for this game, and not riding so much of that emotional letdown the way Green Bay is. And I think maybe Green Bay thought that we had some things figured out, but then they're facing a good football team, and they're in it too. That's the thing. It's it's a 1-score game. They're right there. It's just they haven't had those sustaining drives, and Tennessee really killed so much of that second quarter. They had that 10-minute drive that they went all the way down the field. Didn't get any points out of it, but Tennessee is playing their football game, and they're dictating that to Green Bay, and I don't know that plays into Green Bay's strengths very well, but I do think that Tennessee deserves credit in this one, that this is a top-level football team.
Yeah, 10-minute drive. Like you said, there was a 10-minute drive that resulted in 0 points. They're still up 8, and Green Bay is just not able to match the physicality, the intensity. Nothing on either side of the ball has really lived up to expectations for Green Bay this year. Kadarius Toney didn't live up to expectations in New York or New Jersey, Matt. If Christian Watson wasn't out there, maybe Kadarius Toney was out there. What about Kadarius Toney as a savior? Because it seems like the Red Sea, at least there's red on the uniforms. McCole Hardman's on IR now. I don't think we're going to see Juju Smith-Schuster, so they almost have no choice but to turn to Kadarius Toney against the Chargers. Is this a genie that we can't put back in the bottle?
I would agree that, he may wander off in a year or two. He might decide that he wants to wreak havoc in some way, unintentionally. But as a talent, he has that game-changing talent. He has the game-changing opportunity, and he has the game-changing surrounding talent, and a coach who is willing to put him into a situation to make the most of him. And one of the things that Andy Reid does best is that he does have a really good system, and that makes him a good, a good gatekeeper, task-oriented type of coach who worked under Bill Walsh and Mike Holmgren and all them, and was able to really absorb all of that. But what made him such a good coach with the Eagles and with the Kansas City Chiefs is he's able to establish that system, and then once he's built a foundation for a winner, he's not Kyle Shanahan like, in the sense of like, well, it's my system, my ego, everything is poured into the way we do things here, to the detriment of maybe not using players to the best of their ability all the time. Whereas Andy Reid's able to look at it and say, look, we've got a bunch of good players, but if we can get a Lawrence Taylor-esque like talent who falls asleep in meeting rooms and tells the coaches to, buzz off, I've got this, that it's okay. Like Bill Parcells would do, and say, like, Bill Belichick, chill out, man. Like, what are you going to do? Let him do what he does. He's going to be ready. So why are you making a big fuss of this to me? Don't you have other things to do? And I think that Andy Reid has the ability to understand how to manage individuals and still keep the system intact without creating scenarios where it becomes a leadership problem. And I don't think Tony's that bad. I just think that there was a little immaturity to him that wasn't going to work with Dable. And Dable had a really good position to understand that he needed to establish a baseline, because when Dave Gettleman awards, a wide receiver 3 like Gabriel Davis in Kenny Golladay wide receiver 1 money, and makes him believe that he's a wide receiver 1 to the point that he doesn't understand why he's not good enough to actually be a primary receiver in Dable's offense. You have to reset the culture, and they can do with Toney. They can plug him in. They can use him in a variety of ways that will make it work, and he's uber talented. So the only issue with Toney really is, can he stay healthy? And if he's able to do that, then you probably do have a wide receiver 1 the rest of the way. He is the best chance of being a savior at the wide receiver position that we've mentioned thus far.
Yeah, he was in 40% of the snaps last week, got 6 touches, and on at least 2 or 3 of them showed some things that, unless you're blind, if you're a coach, you want that in your offense. And it's almost unfair. It's almost unfair to imagine Kansas City adding this. And it's really interesting how you can see how much Tyreek Hill adds to Miami, but you don't see the same void in Kansas City. So we'll stick with Kansas City, Jeff. We're looking ahead to Kansas City playing the Chargers on Sunday night. And we all know that when you play the Chargers, the soft underbelly of their defense is the run. Is this the game that Andy Reid establishes the run? Is this one of those point of no return moments with Isaiah Pacheco where maybe overpaying for him right now may look smart after Sunday night? Or will we see that this is a team that's going to try to get it done without a credible running game?
Well, I think we already saw that moment last week where Isaiah Pacheco dominated the backfield rushes. And I think that if you're somebody that only looks at fantasy totals, you might see a 64-yard game, a 6-point game, because he didn't have involvement in the passing game and kind of not realize what happened last week. But then if you look at the usage and the split between carries in that backfield, removing Clyde Edwards-Helaire really out of that backfield and turning that into a two-way split between Jerick McKinnon taking over the passing game, which is something that we had seen for several weeks leading up to this, and then Pacheco grabbing almost all of that rushing game. And that's what you want to see. I think that's as much as you're dealing within the committees. If you can pair it, if you're dealing with a committee of 3, you've just got a mess on your hands and you're really just hoping that somebody scores a touchdown. If you pair it back to 2 with very, very clear roles, and that's what you saw last week in Kansas City, where you've got a back that if you've got favorable game scripts, he's going to get the rushing attempts. He's going to get potential goal line work. And then you've got that passing back for those types of situations that might be trailing game scripts. That makes you feel a lot better about that backfield. And I think that we already saw that passing of the torch last week. There were rumors about that leading up about almost a month ago by this time, where we heard that we had that Sunday, that the breaking story that Pacheco was going to be the starting running back. And then that kind of didn't materialize. It finally did.
Yeah, and we'll see. It would certainly make sense for this team. You just see there's been a lot of stuff going around about the running game is more efficient. We're seeing a team like Tennessee. We're seeing some of these teams, the Jets, teams that are redefining their identity. The Steelers even had a good week last week establishing the run. And
it's no longer a joke,
right? No, well, it's there's so much to this, Matt, and I think one of the things that people like you that are really smart about football and can see things and articulate them, and you've been talking about things like this for a while, that as defenses get lighter, as defenses get more optimized to stop the pass, then they're going to be vulnerable to the run. And eventually the pendulum will swing back. But that's one of the things that makes covering football the way we do so rewarding, is that it is ever changing. It's fluid, and it challenges people like that. All right. I'll make Matt blush here for a second. People know that Matt's content, Football Guys, the top 10, the round tables that he runs, and the replacements. And I love the replacements because, we like to geek out on the deepest of the deep players. All right. So I'm trying to anticipate, Matt. I'm trying to anticipate some of the players who might be in the replacements this week.
Well, you might be feeding them to me because I'm going to be writing it after the show. So
okay. So, well, I'll tell you one that fascinates me. That I'm gonna let's get obscure, but maybe not so obscure because you mentioned Kenny Golladay. How bad is it for Kenny Golladay, right? Because there was this idea with, hey, Kenny Golladay, maybe he saw that, oh, this is kind of fun what they have going on here. Maybe I do want to be part of this, right? Maybe I do still want to play professional football. And he's coming back out of the bye. Everything's going to be fine. And then, no, it's not going to be fine. Actually, they had Isaiah Hodgins on the roster for a week. Now, Dable knows him. Remember that same draft, they took, I think, Gabriel Davis in the 4th and Isaiah Hodgins in the 5th. Yep. Similar receivers in terms of the archetype, right? We saw Gabriel Davis on more of a fast track of the development. Hodgins didn't last on the roster. And so Dable knows him. And you got to love Dable, the way that he's cold-blooded. They asked him about it. He said, we decided to play Isaiah Hodgins. Hodgins had 2 for 41. They're playing Detroit this week. Then there's got to be an angle here, right? Maybe it's Tanner Hudson. Maybe it's back to Darius Slayton, who had that fluke long touchdown last week. But I want to ask you about Hodgins because this is a guy with 3 practices under his belt. Already, he seemed to be in tune with Daniel Jones on his first catch. It was not an easy throw. It was a small window throw. It was one where the synchronicity as far as him breaking open and Jones seeing him letting the ball go. You would not think that Hodgins just had a couple of practices under his belt. What do we think about this Oregon State product? Maybe as a desperation play this week, you got to replace Chris Godwin or Mike Evans or something like that, DK Metcalf, and as someone who could make an impact in a Giants offense looking for someone to make an impact at wide receiver.
It's possible, just from the standpoint that he is a 50-50 ball winner. He's very good at the catch point. That was one of his main things. He's not very fast. So unlike Gabriel Davis, Davis has that build-up speed. So he was always good on those dig routes and those long developing play action routes where he could get separation late as long as he was like the 3rd read. And that's what always has made him good, is that Josh Allen can get to his 3rd read, buy in time, or take the contact and deliver the ball. With Hodgins, he didn't quite have the speed to do that, but he was a good red zone threat or a boundary threat who could go up and win it. So he's got some shiftiness to him. He can get open in those regards, and he does know how to position his body to win the football. Whereas I think Kenny Golladay knows how to jump high, run fast, and be strong, but he doesn't have the refined movements that you would look for. And that's maybe why they looked at Hodgins and say, well, he knows the offense, and we're going to reward the guy who's hustling and doing what he needs to do, maybe as just another message. And maybe Dable might really just be done with Golladay at this point, even if Galladay's like, well, gee, now the bandwagon looks good, right, let me hop on. And Dable's like, no, thanks, we don't want you. That might be the thing. So yeah, I like that idea. The only thing for me is that I'm still a Slayton believer. I was kind of a Slayton guy early. I'm not early in his career, but early this year. And I think that he's really their best guy. I mean, I know Wandale's loved, but I still see Wandale is not quite as good of a version of Tavon Austin. And that concerns me. I mean, it's just, he doesn't know how to position himself at the catch point as well as other players. If you want a guy who people look at Wandale Robinson and actually you see what they see in Wandale Robinson, go to Bloom's team in Pittsburgh and wait for Calvin Austin to get IR. That's a dude who understands how to position himself as a wide receiver and run routes. Oh, and he's a little quicker and a little faster, as hard as that is to believe with Wandale. So you get a track athlete who actually knows how to play wide receiver as opposed to a scat back running back who's getting usage in the slot a little bit. And one day I'll grow into it, but I think this offense is really, it's not going to change much. They have Wandale's going to get a few, over the middle. Maybe they'll hit a big play with one of their schemed up plays. Darius Slayton's going to be the play action intermediate and deep threat, and the guy who's going to give you the best chance after the catch at the boundary in the vertical game. And then most of the volume is probably going to go to a tight end, and as the kind of quick substitute for the outside run game when they don't hand the ball, throw the ball, and pray that the ball somehow lands in Saquon Barkley's hands.
Yeah, and I think a name in there that we didn't mention, maybe Lawrence Cager might be a name there, where
Yes.
transitioning from wide receiver, more of that explosive tight end, that move tight end, and they get Bellinger back here hopefully soon off that eye injury. If they move him as that more traditional inline tight end, and then allow you to play some of those 12 formation where you've got two tight ends on the field at the same time, moving Cager around a little bit. That might be kind of the breakout guy to watch if he's got tight end eligibility. And I know that because he's a former wide receiver, he might not have tight end eligibility in every league that you're in, but that could be a very deep name to keep an eye on, especially if you play in any sort of tight end premium league, or, maybe you're starting two tight ends, but that might be a guy to watch to break out in that offense.
Yeah, between him and Tanner Hudson, the former Buck, had like 3 for 24 last week, 3 for 40 something, 50 something, 58 maybe the week before the bye. So we'll see how it all gets shaken out. But the Giants, again, going up against Detroit this week, you think it's going to be someone, and I hope it's Darius Slayton, because Darius Slayton in his rookie year looked like he was going to be something. What Darius Slayton did in his rookie year, I know we're getting used to rookie wide receivers, usually more than a handful, right? Even this year, we've seen little flashes from different guys like Alec Pierce.
He looked like Christian Watson.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he definitely
kind of wild.
Yeah. Well, and you had the Daniel Jones, Darius Slayton deep ball timing and chemistry, right? That's what was something to behold that year, was the chemistry in terms of being able to drop that ball in stride was something. That's not what they did last week. Last week, it was just Daniel Jones staring down the barrel of a hit and just getting the ball out to somebody he could see that was close to him, and Darius Slayton and the blocking did the rest. We're talking about tight ends. I like that Lawrence Cager call. I think, it's really funny, Matt and Jeff. We always talk about, we see these big receivers and we say, make them a tight end. They're doing it now. They're doing it with Juwan Johnson, right? They're doing it with all these guys. That didn't work out with Akeem Butler, Matt.
I know.
And then you have the other archetype here, like the converted quarterbacks, Logan Thomas. Now we're going to see Tyree Jackson get activated. We're talking a lot about tight ends because it was pretty seismic last week, Jeff, when Zach Ertz went down for the year, Dallas Goedert down for at least the next 4 weeks on injured reserve. And you have to think with the Eagles, we'll see where they're at in terms of the number 1 seed and the division by the time Goedert is potentially ready to be cleared yet. But the math on that might be, let's save him for the playoffs. The point is, if you have Goedert, if Ertz is done for the year, if you have Goedert, you certainly can't count on him coming back just after the 4 weeks. A little bit vague exactly the severity and nature of his injury at this point. That's 2 of the top 5 or 6 tight ends. If somebody lost Ertz or Goedert, and they really didn't, they were going naked Goedert or naked Ertz, and they didn't really have a second tight end. I mean, how many teams have the luxury of a second tight end fantasy-wise that you can count on? What would your advice be to someone picking up the pieces, like a tight end to go out and trade, or just punt the position and don't worry about it? Even if you punt it, maybe somebody look at on the waiver wire. You mentioned a good name already, Lawrence Cager. There's other players potentially either that have been overlooked or getting more opportunity. What's the prescription if you got a headache because you lost Ertz or Goedert?
So if Foster Moreau is available in your league, that would be a name that I would be targeting right now. He's been a tight end 1 over the last 4 weeks, and with Darren Waller on IR, and really the way that Raiders season is going, that, are we going to see Darren Waller again? Are they just going to fall out of it? And you might see Moreau, and that's a player he's going to lead into free agency, and that could be a name that gets picked up. And I think that if you're in a dynasty format, that might be a good cheap one to grab, because you don't know how free agency is going to play out. And this guy, I think he's an NFL starting tight end. I think he's capable of doing that, and he hits the market. He goes in there and he's able to do that. Juwan Johnson, I think, is an interesting name. That's a transition wide receiver that he's really been productive for the Saints over the last handful of weeks, and that's an offense that has been searching for answers, so that could be a deeper name to look at. The thing that troubles me, that there's not a 1-for-1 replacement in these 2 offenses, and as much as tight end usage as you've seen, Trey McBride is a name out there that gets floated a lot, but before Zach Ertz was in Arizona, they didn't use that tight end at all in that offense. And with Hollywood Brown returning, with Rondale Moore and with DeAndre Hopkins, they are filtering so many of those targets right now just to Moore and Hopkins. But with Hollywood Brown involved in there, I think you're going to see a passing game that really just focuses on those 3 receivers. And I don't know that McBride is going to rise as anything more than a red zone threat. And then when you look at the Eagles, I expect that they're going to play committees. And again, I think that they're going to go other directions with that passing game. So it's frustrating where we mentioned Foster Moreau stepping in as in an offense that has relied on the tight end and giving you that immediate production. I don't know that there's a name sitting in these other 2 offenses as much as they have used the tight end here so far this season.
Matt, am I crazy to think that the winner, if there even is a winner sort of fantasy wise in the Philly offense, would be Quez Watkins?
I don't think it's crazy. I mean, I think absolutely that they know what they get in him as a big play option that you can work underneath. And the fact that he's buffered by the 2 receivers that he is buffered by, if A.J. Brown indeed is healthy enough to go without any being really hampered after rolling that ankle on Monday night, then yeah, I think that's a perfect thing. The only correlate I would give to Jeff's great analysis about this, and I think he's absolutely right in the short term with the Cardinals, is that if you from a dynasty perspective, if you're playing the trade game or the value game, then I think where Jeff's at is like dead on. If you're going to play if you're conservative like me and just don't have time to do deals, and you're just like, I'm going to go by talent, then you bet that Trey McBride will outlast Cliff Kingsbury. And if based on everything going on there's a good likelihood of that happening. Somebody looking around and going, well, we've got this Trey McBride kid. He's a football player, coach's football player. Let's find a way to use this guy in a way that gadget friendly Cliff, as he's selling that big house of his with all those gadgets, can, go find whatever he's going to go do in Gadgetville elsewhere, at a university.
And by the way, you brought up Foster Moreau, Jeff. I just want you to know, and I've been carrying, and Matt and I both are Foster Moreau guys. We both identified him pretty early on as one of those players. I think you could probably find a tweet from me before they all get deleted from like 3 years ago that said something like, at some point in the future, Foster Moreau is going to start and he's going to be pretty good. But I hold on to him. We all do this in our dynasty leagues, right? A couple of players that you just can't bring yourself. You need to make a move because you're down a spot for a week and buys and injuries. And like, I'm gonna have to drop Foster Moreau if I do that. In one of the leagues that Matt and I are in together, I dropped Foster Moreau, and I saw that you were like, it was within like an hour, I think.
Oh yeah, the minute I saw that, it was like over. Like, are you kidding me?
And it's like, and I knew it, and I knew there was going to be a day I was going to come back and be like, I shouldn't have. If it was a league without Matt Waldman, I might have been able to get away with it.
Well, you know how it is. It's like between you, it's like us and Jeff Teffertiller.
Right.
Jeff's that other guy who like just haunts the waiver wire. It's the only, I got lucky, I think, that time, because I laughed because I dropped Donovan Peoples-Jones and you swooped in and got him. So
there you go. We're at the swap meet.
That's right.
We're at the flea market, fantasy flea market. Someone take that and run with it. The Packers get a field goal, and then the Titans are running right back down the field again. Chiggy Okonkwo every week seemingly making a big play.
Special.
Yeah, the new Delaney Walker, and now you have Tennessee knocking on the door. And Tennessee's looking good. Tennessee's feeling good right now where this team is, and for all the power we thought was going to be concentrated in the AFC West, Kansas City's still there, but it's a little different than what we expected. So real quick, I'll just do a quick lightning round thing with you, Jeff, because like Matt said, maybe you aren't going to want to make a trade. Maybe you are going to go to the waiver wire. I'm just going to toss a couple of tight end waiver wire. You just like word association, just like, what do you think? Kylan Granson.
I like him. I think that he's growing in that role, and he's the most natural receiver out of that triumphant of tight ends that the Colts are using. I don't know if you're going to get the volume out. That's really my concern on there. That I think that he can do. He's creative after the catch, and talk about why tight ends that can move throughout the formation. He's that type of player, but I don't know that you're going to get consistent volume to be able to really plug him in.
Okay, I'll give you one, Matt. Tyler Conklin.
I'm a big Tyler Conklin fan, and I think that Zach Wilson is figuring out that maybe he's a guy that he needs to continue to go to. A little bit more up and down, but I think that with, as a low-end tight end one, if you're trying to look for something, he's been available because people are so turned off by Wilson at times that that he kind of gets added and dropped. So he's one of those guys that 1 week he's going to give you, 8 targets, and the next week he's going to give you 2. But when he gets you that 8, he might give you like 60 to 80 yards and a touchdown. So, it's worth giving it a shot.
Yeah, Derrick Henry getting a touchdown pass to Austin
after a 42-yard reception too.
Yeah,
buddy. Wow.
Yeah, you can really see watching it, the arc of an NFL season, how much experience, postseason experience, continuity, a coach, a strong-minded coach that it's just the leadership really. And it's just something watching these teams like Kansas City, like Tennessee, get settled in, and then meanwhile you have teams like, well, Jeff, like your Bills in the background there.
Yeah,
they all of a sudden they're finding themselves in a must-win situation, and a must-win situation where they get a break from the weather with this game getting moved to Detroit, and actually in an interesting quirk, they're going to play in Detroit again on Thanksgiving. So they just get Detroit's a great city. That's great for Buffalo. I know a few places. It's a really good city. And what's that?
Is Mike Vrabel the Bill Cowher of our generation right
Sure.
now? I think he's got a little bit of that going on, and he doesn't seem to take crap from young players, like young players who don't play well, or even if they were like mid-round picks. He's just like that. What he did to Dez Fitzpatrick, like how he just basically railed him out. It was like, listen, man, you got to get it together. I think he has a good culture in Tennessee, and he couldn't. And I think he looked at Julio Jones and saw that youth. Saw that the injuries and just said, "No, I can't do that with the youth on my team. I can't put up with a player like that. I can't baby him."
Yeah.
Well,
that was the early storylines with Treylon Burks too, coming in and really, he wasn't in physical condition that Vrabel expected to be him, and he didn't kowtow to his first round pick. He really broke him in there.
Yeah.
And this, by the way, I just got my man Shylander said King Henry is a better passer than Malik. That's pretty good.
But is he a better runner? Yeah, he probably is.
Probably.
Okay, but he's not faster.
I think
he's
that's safe.
He's not faster.
Yeah.
No, you definitely can see the strength of the culture. The one thing that gives me heartburn, how good would this team have been if they just had kept AJ Brown?
Yeah,
I don't know what part of this might be a part of the story that we don't know, but
yeah,
that might. I know Treylon Burks can end up being a good player, but.
Yeah.
Well, you guys have followed long enough. And my joke after that trade was really this organization has hunted that exact type of wide receiver, that big physical archetype wide receiver for 20 years. And then they finally find one, and then they trade him 3 years into his career. And then they go right back in and dive right back in and try to find the next one. And it's just, I don't know. That was mind-boggling. But again, what was going on there? But the stories from AJ Brown kind of sound like they didn't even come close to his contract demands, and it really sounded like his contract demands weren't all that unrealistic compared to the market.
Yeah, well, what's really fascinating to me about that, Jeff, is we're looking at this offseason, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown, and then just some of the big contracts that got signed, players staying with their teams. DJ Moore, that's probably not a good one. DK Metcalf, Mike Williams even. But I think you can certainly talked about this at the beginning of the show with Tyreek Hill. I mean, you really can see that wide receivers jumping to basically being the second premium position behind quarterback, AJ Brown, what he's done for Philadelphia, that it's justified. And even though it's a player who the target, the crosshairs only on them, I mean, even a player like Cooper Kupp is only influencing how many plays out of the game, like 10 to 20% of the plays. And unless they were anticipating that these two high shells were going to stop the passing game, and they felt like there was a chance of that happening, and they felt like we don't want to overpay receivers right now if we're going to go back to the run. I mean, I don't know if teams were anticipating to that degree.
I think really, and I wrote an article this spring about this. What you're seeing the player empowerment era, and you're seeing, if you follow the NBA at all, you kind of saw that transition to where buddies started just to play with each other, and they would manipulate their situation to be like, well, we're going to play together on this team. And that's really what you saw with the wide receivers and the quarterbacks, because how many of these guys had pre-existing relationships? Hollywood Brown going to play with his college quarterback, Kyler Murray. Devontae Adams going to play with his college quarterback, Derek Carr. And we saw that Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown are those pictures from Disney coming out when that really came out. And it's really, I think it's less on team building so much as it's players that are putting their foot down and realizing the power that they have and where the ecosystem is kind of sitting with that. And yes, you moving that wide receiver up to that secondary primary position there. And teams did that because that's how they valued those wide receivers, players that can impact the passing game. We've seen the draft head that direction for 10 plus years now. That's the way that the draft has been building, but that's that player empowerment area. This isn't players that are just going to random other teams just for money. They're dictating exact precise situations they want to go into.
And it's such a great point. And if I were to just have fun trolling it, I'd say I'm looking forward to the day that Dax Milne and Zach Wilson.
Right, that's his guy.
Or the
back to
XFL.
XFL, yeah. I mean, XFL's back here.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, like, the Chase Claypool, did they play Ohio State anytime when he was at Notre Dame? I don't know about that one. But yeah, I think you're right, Jeff, to point out that in some of these cases, it absolutely is player empowerment coming to the NFL. And that only applies to a certain percentage of people. There's a lot of players like, Elijah Moore, no empowerment. You have no power, Elijah Moore, none at all. This actually is a good transition. I'm going to do this. We're going to be signing off here in a couple of minutes, but I've got to first. I want to see just what StreamYard does with this because it's a question from Facebook that's really big. Let's see. Wow, there it is. I covered you up, Matt. You still there? Matt, can you hear me? Anyway, basically the question is Matthew Suyaira Globe. Sorry, is that maybe an anagram for something? He said he gave up a broken Elijah Mitchell in a first for Swift, and he got Swift in a third. Does he jump ship on Swift, or hold out that he can remain healthy and be more involved? And he had listed his lineup, but Swift is one of those players for me, Matt, that I feel like how quickly we forget. He looked like he was going to be a league winner out of the gate this season. He looked like a player that didn't need a whole lot of touches, and he just looked electric. Now, is it going to be the story of his career that, we're going to get to see that player come into focus, but not for long, and that's just going to be how it goes? And you see the Lions, I think, handling him in a way that they understand this, and they're scaling him, not even really scaling him up, actually kind of keeping him in the driveway for these first few games, and it's making Swift frustrated. But unlike Elijah Moore, unlike Benjamin, who got his ticket out of town to the Texans, with Swift, it almost seems like Dan Campbell's like, good, that's good. If you're hungry, if you're feeling that right now, then you're right where we want you to be. Is that going to result in something that changes fantasy seasons this year, Matt?
It could. I'm not. This is one of those where I'm going to say I don't really know, because on the one hand, I've never really understood the Swift love to the degree that it's gotten, because the things that have been criticized about him lately have been criticized about him for the past 2 years in terms of decision making. He's not a great decision maker. He's also not extremely. He doesn't have unbelievable acceleration. He's got good long speed that he needs a good runway to get up to. He's not a great tackle breaker either. So you combine all that, and I think, well, I'd rather have a slower decision maker. Yeah, the beef is with Jamal Williams, even if it doesn't sizzle to the degree that people want it to sizzle. So I think I think they'll find a way to use him. But then again, if they continue to play poorly or not win games, then Dan Campbell saying, well, I like him where he's at, that's only going to play out better next year at best. So I think it's time that if you're in a situation where you must win now, it might be time to jump ship on him. I think you just kind of have to go for it at that stage, and go from there, because at best he's only going to have a split with Williams, because Williams can do everything well other than make breakaway plays. So why are they going to just like X out Williams now that Swift is healthy? They won't do that. It'll just be a split. So yeah, I try and get rid of him.
Yeah, that's fair. And we'll see also. I really hope that Dan Campbell is still around next year. I think this is one of those situations where you got to give it 3, 4, 5 years. The culture's there. And the other thing is they have that up and coming offensive coordinator there, and you would hate for them. Obviously, if you take away the time whenever Swift and St. Brown were out, obviously this is an offense that gets more than the parts. The sum is greater than the parts. And you have to look to the offensive coordinator, and then you also have a chance this year. I think the Rams pick might be higher than the Lions pick, guys. I think you might see 2 top 10 picks for this team, which certainly will leave them in a place where if Brad Holmes sees a quarterback he wants, he's going to be able to go get him. If
this doesn't work out, then I think what has to happen here is that you need to come pick me up in Georgia, and then we'll take a trip up to Ohio, and then we'll make our 3-city tour, which will begin with Detroit, Chicago in the middle, because their ownership has some crazy stuff. And then if Christian McCaffrey doesn't get the looks that he needs to get with Elijah Mitchell back, then we'll talk about what we talked about a couple weeks ago with
trade. That's right.
So we may have to we'll make a 3-city tour, and we might have to knock on some doors,
Yeah, and I'll say knock on the door of the Christian McCaffrey team and try to trade for him right now, because he's going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. Christian McCaffrey's fine. It's good because you can look. This is where you can catch people box score scouting, because they look at the box score like, this is a committee, and it's not. It's Christian McCaffrey's backfield, but that's okay. This is not just our show. It's you all's show. It's all of your show out there. Thursday night, we enjoy this tradition, getting to spend time together at halftime as we're seeing an intriguing game now. As Christian Watson, all he does is catch touchdowns, 2 catches, 2 touchdowns, and there's a pulse. There's the defibrillator getting him back up off the table. I'm back. Don't go into the light, but we're gonna go into the light, at least for tonight. I'll be back Sunday.
Rage against it.
Right. That's right. That's right. I will not go gently into that good night. And Chris Allen and I will be back Sunday morning doing starts and sits. Cecil and I will be recapping everything after the late games on Sunday. And then it's another week. It's getting more intense, just like the NFL. There's more on the line every week. We're going to be there with you always to try to help you to your championship, because you're so classy.